everyone. My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are doing a spooky, scary Halloween story time, which I don't generally do on my channel, so I apologize if this isn't like a proper story time. I'm gonna default to doing more of an educational thing, less of like a salacious, titillation, verging on lies kind of a thing, if you were like expecting that for some reason. I have really just been thinking a lot about some of the past BDSM events that I have been to, because it has been 2 years since I have been to a BDSM party. Now, back in August, I did do a weekend class that was a private event at someone's home, but I haven't been to a public BDSM party or event in 2 years. And it's not really that I took it for granted at the time. I mean, I didn't see a reason why they wouldn't keep happening in some form, but I really miss that experience. And so I've been thinking about what are some of my favorites, what would I want to do again, and I remembered there was a really amazing Halloween party that I went to a couple of years ago, and I thought you all would like to know about it because it's kind of spooky in the spirit of things. Maybe you want some ideas, maybe you are new to BDSM and you want to know what going to parties is like. It's really multi-purpose, but to get to the actual story of it, there was a Halloween party that happened a couple of years ago at my first, what I would call my home dungeon. Now, when I went there, I had been moved away for I think like a year or a year and a half. So for me, it was kind of like a homecoming. It was like, oh, I get to go back. I get to show all of my new friends this space. And so we went up together and we went to this Halloween party. It was a couple of hours of driving, but not too bad, nothing really intense or anything. And the Halloween party, if I recall, was like a haunted house mixed with a carnival sort of a theme. And unfortunately, this dungeon has been closed down for about 2 years, so all of the old posters and events and even the website isn't really around these days for me to reference, but I'm just kind of trying to go from my memory. And this dungeon, when we arrived, let me explain it a little bit because I think that'll help kind of keep track during this story. So it is in an industrial district. It's basically like a big, long, open warehouse that has been sort of converted to have separate spaces to it, but is mostly a big open area. And the very front part is a reception area. It basically only has like a desk at it that is built into a wall to basically take ID cards and sign waivers. Not really anything else going on there. There was a display cabinet that had some locally made BDSM goods for sale and some business cards. Not really anything else going on there. Very subtle, very vanilla, nothing too intimidating. Now, after that, after you had signed all the waivers, everything else, gotten checked in, paid for a ticket, you would go through a curtain door and enter a locker area. And when I say lockers, I literally mean like lockers. Like, I think they literally got these from like a closed middle school or something, and you would bring your own lock and you could use one to store your phone, your purse, extra toys. They did also have a coat rack. Now, all of this was DIY. I know some dungeon spaces do have basically valets that will take your coat and keep track of your goods. We're not that fancy. We don't have anything like that. It's very much a bring your own service sub kind of event. And even though this was a locker space and it was more quiet, it was still open to almost the whole rest of the play space. So even if you were just like changing, there wasn't really a private place to do that. So basically right away you had to be fairly comfortable either in what you were wearing or being prepared to take your clothes off in front of any of a number of strangers. Now, I will say that this space does have very friendly people at it, or at least it did. I never felt uncomfortable there, even though I was oftentimes the youngest. I went when I was single. Like, I went with all kinds of different, like, if it was gonna be creepy, it would be creepy to me kind of scenarios, and nothing weird ever really happened, except for one time when I was really new, which if you haven't watched it yet, one of my very old videos where I talked about my first time ever going to a BDSM event. I talk about that story in that one. So I really enjoyed the space, and they didn't necessarily have a lot of physical decorations because, again, it's a warehouse space. It's very big, it's very open, the ceilings are insanely tall, so there's not really anything to put decorations on unless you could get like 20 feet in the air to the rafters, more or less. They did have some things on the walls, but the main decor was actually people doing scenes. And this was something they had done, and I don't know why they are weed whacking outside at literally 6 p.m. If you can hear that, I'm sorry, it's ruining the whole ambiance of this, but they decided like 6 p.m., perfect hour for weed whacking. But anyways, they did have actual people sort of serving as the background decor, as the main sort of mood enhancer to the event. And the first area is generally where the lighter play would happen, because there were basically two spaces that were back to back, about equal in size, that were separated by a wall. And this first area had, I'm gonna describe this and you're gonna be like, this isn't real, but I swear this is real. So there was somebody that had like a giant human-sized wheel, like imagine the Wheel of Fortune, but if it was, instead of being on the ground, was upright, and if you could strap a person to it. Yeah, they had that going and someone was on it, and they were throwing daggers at them. Like, fear play, knife play, edge play, clown shit. Like, it was all going on at the same time. I can't believe to this day that someone was really doing that, but they did. It's literally something you would read in an erotica and go, oh no, you can't do that in real life. This person did. It was a very festive carnival sort of environment. There were so many people watching that particular scene. It was like this whole sort of magician and magician assistant vibe to it, and I think they did more throughout the night, but the main thing was like, I'm gonna throw daggers at this person and they're not gonna get hurt. So that one was very entertaining to see right away. And again, keep in mind, the lighter stuff was on this side of the wall. Now, they did also have the most amazing buffet ever. Basically, that room was a spanking horse and a big bondage wall on the far side, and the person doing the knife throwing scene. Then there was a small seating area on the far right hand side, and then a kitchen for snacks. Normally that would be it. Normally they would just have the kitchen. You could keep drinks. They had like pretzels, fruit snacks, the usual stuff you get at a dungeon for cheap snacks. But for this party, there was literally, I think 2/3 of the whole right-hand side of the wall was just like a spread of food. It was something where everyone brought stuff in. Now, this dungeon did have a potluck at it that would happen, I think, at least once a month. They would have a discussion group potluck, one for BDSM, one for polyamory. And so there was already a culture of like, bring food to the dungeon, socialize, have nice time. And people brought it. There was sort of, you know, the usual stuff, you know, celery, carrots, chips, soda. There were all kinds of themed finger foods. There was punch. There were cupcakes. There were deviled eggs. There was graveyard dirt. There was pumpkin pie. There were like 4 pies. There were so many pies. Everyone brought pie, I guess. But it was just the most food I've ever seen at a BDSM event. And people were very respectful. Again, it was serve yourself. yourself, kind of take what you want, go around, mingle, have fun, but also have food. So very typical party stuff there. And to add to the ambiance, they also had the lights turned down fairly low, which is kind of common for a dungeon in general, but definitely today they had the lights down lower. They did have some decorations in the background, especially like around the food area, and they also had mood music playing. So even though they couldn't do a lot with like overhead decorations, they still had a pretty good vibe going. Now, like I said, the more intense play was on the other side of the wall. And this dungeon did facilitate quite a number of edge play events. I think the first class I ever went to, the first one was a rope one. The second one I ever went to was a literal like edge play class where the person talked for like 2 hours about how they like to do frontal whipping and how they had been like kicked out of dungeons before for like playing too hard. And I was like, I don't know if this seems right. Anyways, they go pretty hard here. And they had what was affectionately called the Dexter Room, which if you have seen the TV show Dexter, you can guess at what that implied. So content warning, gonna talk about blood for a second here. They had basically a makeshift like cube that they had covered with layers of tarp all over on the floor, on the walls, everywhere. So it was one both sort of like shaded from the other people around, but also like controlling the blood splatter. And it was a giant blood play room. And they had added the extra ambiance of having like fake blood kind of around the outside. So you really knew what that room was going to be about. Now, they did also have a table that they also used for medical play. And there was someone who had volunteered to be one of the people that was like background scene decor, and they were a human voodoo doll. So now, trigger warning, content warning for needles, it was exactly like what it sounds like. They were a giant human voodoo doll with needles. And if you donated a certain amount to the dungeon, you could put a needle in them, if I remember correctly. I never did that. This was before I really got into anything blood play related, so I kind of saw it in the background, but didn't linger on it or do it for myself. But I definitely heard it. There was a lot of ambient screaming. Also in this space, as per usual, they did have an area for littles to wear their Halloween costumes, and they had candy and everything else. It was all very cute. It's just like, it's super funny to be like, human voodoo doll, littles doing coloring books. And I don't know if anyone else's scene is like this, but at that dungeon, like, all of the littles were like fucking hardcore. Like they were the hardcore players. Like they were like not fazed by blood. They did like really elaborate like 3-hour long spanking scenes. Like they really just didn't care. They were like, we're not fazed by this. We're really intense. And like, you know, they would have like sleepovers and stuff. They would do like cutesy soft things, but they also like just were not fazed by anything that seemed to happen in that dungeon for some reason. But yeah, there was also a little bit of a lighter area for the pets and the littles and so on, which of course like I gravitated towards. Now I'm not a little, so I'm not into like the coloring books or anything like that, but like as a pet, I like to go say hello to the fellow pets, and that's basically what I did, is I said hello. Now this was a costume party, so there were a lot of people that were in costumes. Anything you could possibly think of. Superheroes, princesses, vampires, pirates, nurses, vague, weird references to video games that only 2 people got, like the whole spectrum of different costumes. Now, my partner wasn't really into dressing up that much, so I don't think they wore a costume, but I had like a purple witch outfit, which I'd had for a couple of years. It was like super simple to wear as like an easy costume, and that's what I wore. It wasn't like super exciting. I don't have any pictures of it, so don't get your hopes up. It has long been retired because eventually the zipper did just wear out and it stopped zipping up. But yeah, I had a purple witch costume on, and for the partner that I was with, we did impact play, we did rope bondage, and that was really something that this dungeon was known for. It had a lot of shibari people, a lot of rope classes. They had all kinds of different equipment, like the bondage wall that I mentioned before. They had like big stands where you could do bondage underneath them. They had tripods. They had, is it a hoist? Is that what it's called? I thought maybe it might be called a cinch for a second, but I think it's called a hoist. They also had a hoist too, because the ceilings were just so high. And they had a lot of stuff going on in the rope bondage department. Now there was another social area here with like couches and bean bags and other kind of cuddly stuff to sort of just sit and chit chat. And you might think that at a dungeon it's like all play all the time, but there's just not enough equipment for everyone to be playing at once. And especially with a more socially focused party like this one with a lot of spectators, and you are supposed to be watching and enjoying the other scenes going on, there's going to be a lot of people just like standing around watching, chatting, just like kind of having a casual fun time. So there was also a space for that too, and they had cages and stuff as well. So even if you wanted to do like a really sort of simple, low-key bondage, I'm gonna put you in a cage while I eat and then like sit on top of the cage, you could do that as well. All different shapes and sizes, everything like that. And we enjoyed one of those for a little bit while we watched one of the scenes. Now, I don't clearly remember all of the other scenes that happened, so I don't want to be like misrepresenting anything, but I believe there was also someone using a different medical play table to do like a medical examination. And electroplay and medical play are like the two things that I'm like, I'm never gonna judge anyone for being into them, but they are sincerely not really my thing. TENS units are kind of okay, and like I like blood play, but if it's just like medical play with like stirrups and being really sterile, cold, white, this is not personally my jam. So I didn't really look at that super closely, but there was a medical examination going on with like the whole gynecology setup. There were a lot of people that were doing just like general scenes that weren't even very Halloween-like. They were just like wearing a costume and doing a scene. And this dungeon, because there were a lot of woodworkers in the area that had donated their time and their experience to make equipment for the space, there were a lot of different options. I already mentioned the medical tables. There was, of course, different crosses, different cages, different spanking benches, different horses. If it was a platform that you wanted to do a scene on, you could probably do it. They even had a barrel, like an actual barrel that you could go over if you wanted to do like a little bit of pirate roleplay, which did happen. So there were a lot of options for different things to play on. But of course, one of the favorites was rope. And for me, that was really what I wanted to do that night. And part of the reason why I wanted to tell this story is this is like the first time I ever went into subspace with rope. So we did a suspension in that back room, and they had like a whole setup for it, and we did a full suspension off the ground. So like all of my body was off the ground. I was in a chest harness, I believe, and of course I wasn't the one putting rope on myself, and I had my eyes closed like most of the time, so I don't remember what all the ties were. I think I had something around my hips also, and a futomomo, so my it was like my leg was bent like this kind of. So I was like fully up in the air, and I remember just like I just felt so floaty and so amazing. And it was the combination of the really friendly people and the environment and just like the festive joy, I think, of everything, and how the rope felt on my body and feeling really close and connected with this partner. And it felt so amazing. And I remember I was like basically almost perfectly horizontal to the ground. I wasn't even like really inverted at all. I was just like totally horizontal, and I just remember picturing in my head like it was like white blue floaty clouds. It wasn't even painful. It was like so beyond that it didn't even register to my brain. And my partner was on the ground underneath me, like laying on their back, looking up at me, and I just remember like floating and being like so floaty in the air. I don't remember how long I was up there for. Like it could have been 5 minutes, it could have been 50. I think it was probably more like half an hour maybe total, because rope is very deceptive time-wise, and we spent a long time up in that rope just enjoying that space, and it was a lot of fun. It was, again, I didn't even really know that what was happening to me at the time was like rope space or subspace. I just like felt really amazing. It wasn't like the goal of the scene. We didn't try to make it happen. It was just this kind of like magical combination of different things happening and the space and just getting lucky, more or less, essentially. Even if I completely forget the rest of the party, I will always remember that moment and that scene, because it was, I think, very fundamental to the rest of my kink experience afterwards, and has always kind of been this like guidepost of like what I know is possible to do in rope, because I have experienced this thing before. We did eventually have to stop because of course other people want to use equipment. Oh my gosh, who would have guessed? We did some aftercare, we had some snacks, we cuddled, and we spent most of the rest of the night just like hanging out, talking to people, having a nice kind of chill, casual time, I would say, because I don't know, that I don't want to like glorify it too much, but like that moment was so perfect that it didn't feel like we needed to do anything else. We could just sort of enjoy that moment for what it was and have it be, you know, not really try to like force anything else to happen. And I think for my brain as well, like after having that, like your brain is like, do it again, yay, one more time please. And it's like, should you really though? Is that like good for your body? Know your limits, because literally going into a deep headspace like that, it's like your brain is on drugs, and at that point, making further rational choices for your own health and well-being, slightly modified from normal, let's say. So you gotta be careful. But I was luckily with someone that I really knew very well and trusted, and it went so amazingly well, so great. And to this day, it is one of my favorite parties and events that I've ever gone to. And I have gone to other Halloween parties besides this one, mostly at friends' houses, and honestly, they tend to be just like really vanilla. Like it's like kinky friends and poly people, and sometimes you will get someone to scene, but because you all know each other and it's like this small house, you're like, okay, but we could just like play a giant board game though. You know, it's like making scenes happen wasn't necessarily the priority. It was just about being comfortable in the same space as other kinky people, knowing you could say anything, make any joke, and people wouldn't be weirded out about learning about your, I don't know, serial killer fetish or what have you because it's Halloween. So that was more just like comfortable having an adult party but with kinky people. And I've never been to something outside of like a torture garden party maybe, where it was so themed and they took time to really kind of give it that ambiance and that spirit of being in Halloween and being creepy and spooky. And yeah, I would love for somewhere to do something like that again, but around here I just don't think that's gonna happen. Again, there's maybe something happening in November, but nothing for Halloween, so who knows? Anyways, that is all of the time that I have because my camera is running out of battery. So I hope that you liked this. Again, I don't really normally do story times, so I hoped this was interesting or informative or something. If you have anything you want to say or questions, anything like that, you can put that down in the comment section below. If you did enjoy this video and you have not already, please do subscribe. I make videos twice a week about all sorts of kink and BDSM related topics. And finally, if you really enjoyed this, if you want to support what I do, the best way that you can do that is with Patreon. A link to that will be down below. If you do already support me over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a very happy Halloween. Bye-bye.